This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow in the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, as usual, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome to the show.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, I don't know, have you seen this new book yet called This Town by Mark Leibovich?
No, but I'm intrigued by the full title of it.
Yes,
Two
it's...
Parties and a Funeral.
Yes, it's interesting. He is the editor of the New York Times Magazine, but he has alienated both sides of Washington, and how he describes Washington can be used to describe most state capitals as well. He essentially says the major line of delineation in Washington is not between the Republicans and the Democrats, but it's between those who are in office and those who are out of office.
Oh.
And he talks about the fact that most legislative battles are won by, are you ready? Hold on.
I am.
The people with the most lobbyists and the highest price lobbyists.
Oh, there's a shocker.
Isn't it a shocker? Although many of the people across the land, I guess, haven't realized this. And one person who has realized this, who's fighting the good fight day in, day out in the trenches in Harrisburg, is our guest today. He's a guest we've had before, but there are new developments over the horizon, and we thought it was important to have him back before the new year. And that is our good friend, Steve Hicks, the president of ABSCUF, the faculty union of all the faculty for the 14 state universities. Welcome back, Steve. It's so nice to have you back.
Well, it's good to be here, Charlie. Despite the circumstances and the topic we're going to talk about, I think it's always good to be here and have an opportunity to discuss the issues with you.
Well, the last time we were together, we were hopeful that we wouldn't perhaps be talking about the subject matter that is before us today.
Right.
And that involves the word retrenchment.
Right.
Maura?
Well, I think for our viewers, let's start with some of the basics.
All right.
Let's start with retrenchment 101.
Okay. Retrenchment is a word of French derivation meaning pruning, which is used in academia for laying off faculty members, and particularly laying off faculty members who have tenure. Most of your viewers are familiar with tenure, which is often used as a pejorative term. But tenure is something to a faculty member like Charlie and I is important because it provides us the opportunity to have academic freedom and to be able to investigate whatever topics we want from whatever angle we want without fear of losing our job. So retrenchment does away with your tenure and costs you your job. It would be like a furlough for someone else, but of course there's always that tenure piece that means we have kind of a different safety net involved.
So we're hearing that word a lot now because there are cuts looming. Can you tell us what's going on?
Well, yes. Our collective bargaining agreement says by October 30th, the management of the universities have to provide letters to those tenured people who are not going to come back next year. In October, we received 45 letters across the system, 5 different universities. So we have a large number of people, the largest number in history, who look to be out of a job May 30th of next year. So part of our responsibility at this point is to find them another job while also engaging with the administration at the universities to try to get them to change their mind and determine that they really do have the financial resources to continue the faculty members forward.
Are there going to be any other cuts besides the tenured professors?
Thank you for asking more, because that's not really the big number. Our concern is the large number of temporary faculty who will be losing their jobs too, and that's been a trickier number to figure out. The announcement at Edinburgh University was that there'd be 34 temporaries losing their jobs. At the other institutions, it's been more about monetary savings than head count. So it's harder to put a number on it, but we expect that there may be as many as 150 fewer faculty on the campuses, 5 campuses, and what happens at the other 9 is a little bit more indefinite. But those 5 will probably lose about 150 people in terms of the faculty.
Steve, how are students affected by these cuts?
That's always a tricky question to figure out, direct causation. But just the number one thing is the change in programs. Cutting faculty means some programs are going to disappear, so students aren't going to have the opportunity to major in, say, music or chemistry at various places and some of the modern languages. And so they're going to lose that opportunity. But also in terms of the numbers we're talking about, clearly there's going to be larger class size with what's left over. They're going to do more with less and continue that. So they're going to see effects on class size. There's also the part of what's being cut is academic support services, which are those areas that help people, whether it's counseling or with extra tutoring in subjects. And we live in an era, as you know, where administrators talk about retention a lot and hanging on to the students you have and first to second year retention. And students are going, I think, struggle more with that, and institutions are going to struggle more with that because those support services are being cut in a lot of these retrenchments.
Well, the state system of higher education has a new chancellor now, Chancellor Brogan. He comes in at a very interesting time, of course, and he has been saying that retrenchment, our word of the day, is a necessity, and that there has to be some sort of realignment of programs. Do you agree? What do you think?
I think it's very interesting that Chancellor Brogan started October 1st and didn't really take a listening tour and didn't have much of a honeymoon, but jumped right into the fray. I think, as an English professor, you just asked me to define the word retrenchment. I want to define the word necessity. To retrench faculty, we think that the university should show that they're an extremist for a period of time, that they have no money in the bank, and we're not seeing that. So when he says necessity, well, he's from Florida, and they have a different dynamic than we do. I think maybe his necessity and my necessity aren't quite the same thing. The program alignment wording is interesting too, because I'm always challenged again as an English professor to understand what it means. What are we aligning with? Obviously, we've heard a lot over the last year and a half from people like the governor's post-secondary commission that met last summer about needing certain jobs being filled, and we haven't been doing it. So that seems to be where they're directed. But I've seen the list they keep coming up with, and it's really not a sustainable list. I mean, how many advanced manufacturing people are we going to hire in the Commonwealth? I mean, we have 115,000 students. We need to talk about, a broad base in terms of education and talk about people who can survive the fact that most people change careers 3 to 5 times these days. We need to have them educated so they don't have to go back to school every time. So we need a broad education. And I keep hearing from business leaders. I read an article every week from somebody saying, I want somebody with critical thinking skills, writing skills, communication skills, group work skills. We need those kinds of things.
Well, employers want to do their own training.
Right.
The specifics of their,
Exactly. They want somebody with those kinds of skills,
right.
But if they have something specific, it's not going to be prepared before they get there. They're going to do it in-house once they get there.
Right.
So I find the program alignment stuff seems to be rhetoric that I'd really like to know what it meant. So that's a challenge in these times.
Well, Steve, we've talked about this before in the past when you've been here and when other educational leaders have been here, and we've been talking about higher education. With higher education, it seems higher education isn't supposed to be a for-profit enterprise. You're not supposed to lose money, and I'm a big supporter of economy and efficiency and effectiveness. But on the other hand, it seems so long as you're not losing money, the job of a university, isn't it, is to prepare young people for their career and for life, and to preserve civilization and pass on civilization. So if you're cutting all of your music programs, your foreign languages programs, your philosophy programs, how is that preserving civilization for future generations?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but that is a great point, Charlie, that those are majors that are at the core of what we think of as higher education. And at this point, the institutions, I haven't named them, from East Stroudsburg on the eastern side of the state to Edinburgh on the western side of the state, every place north of I-80, we're losing music programs, we're losing philosophy, we're losing chemistry, we're losing German and French. The only language most of them will be teaching is Spanish. So we're going to lose all that in terms of our culture and the educated nature of our populace. We're not going to have people who know these things, and it's going to change the nature of what we're going to be able to do for employers in the Commonwealth, because they're going to come in, they're going to want college-educated people with a wide background, with all those skills we talked about, critical thinking and communication skills. And my best example of this that's concerned everybody for years is how many education majors we have. And when I started 6 years ago, the statistic that got cited over and over again was 1 in 3 teachers leaves teaching in their first 3 years. Wow. You think about that number, it's a massive number. The turnover, people get into it, and for all sorts of reasons, they don't stay. All right? Those people aren't all in the unemployment line. Amazingly enough, you hear you hear people in the job market say, we want those skills. Those people have organization skills, they have communication skills, they're used to working in groups, they have all those skills, even if they did have that major and it doesn't seem to be, oh man, we don't have enough teaching jobs. And Governor Corbett cut the budget $1 billion 2 years ago for K through 12. And what do we have, 30,000 fewer teachers than we did 2 years ago? So there are fewer jobs, but people with those skills still have marketable sets of skills that people want. And I think that's been proven over and over again, that those kinds of core skills are what we need to be training people in. We'll have a better Commonwealth and a better economy because of it in the long run.
Well, where do we go from here? We're finishing out 2013. Sounds like 2014 is going to start with you doing battle on the budget front and having to deal with all the cuts, the retrenchments. What happens now?
I think a big challenge in higher ed these days is the message we're talking about today, and Charlie pointed out about economies. It's not supposed to be for profit. It's supposed to be a public good. Everybody's chipping in because when students graduate with a college education, they ended up not going to prison as much. They don't use as much health care. They pay more taxes. They're healthier. They vote more. All those positives it helps us as a society, and we need to be educating more people and not less. We need to be investing more in higher education and not less, because the money you get back in an investment is multifold. So we need to push that message, and what's been lost the last handful of years in the austerity budgets is that investment, that need for investment. We've been, cut, and we've been held at level funding, and I think we need the legislature and the governor to start talking about we need to invest in higher ed, because if not, all the states around us who are investing more in higher ed are going to go past us and become the places businesses are going to go.
No, it seems to be conventional wisdom that in a time of economic downturn, you invest in education.
And we didn't do it in this downturn. We cut. We're like 45th in the nation in terms of what we've been putting into higher education the last few years.
Well, Steve, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for updating our viewers, and we look forward to your next visit. We'll be right back with our next guest on Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. Maura and I, on the second segment of the show, are going to tackle another of Pennsylvania's large challenges. We've heard over and over again that there are three challenges confronting state government at present time, and one of them is the pension system, the solvency of the pension system.
Yes.
And we have someone here from Capitol Hill who's going to talk about this with us and might have some solutions. We're very happy to welcome Representative Warren Kampf to the show. Welcome, Representative.
Well, thanks for having me on the show.
And you represent portions of Montgomery and Chester County, I believe.
That's right, in southeastern Pennsylvania. That is correct.
Okay. Let's start out, before I turn you over to Maura, how bad is the pension problem in Pennsylvania? How bad is it across the country in terms of the solvency of state employee pension systems?
So it's really bad across the country. I think people have watched, there's a bankruptcy in Detroit. Now, there are lots of things going on in that particular city with the decline over many years of the car industry. But Stockton, California, I think went into a sort of a similar situation. We've got cities in our state that have big pension problems, and the state itself has a massive pension problem that we need to tackle.
Well, one of the questions I've been really interested in knowing is what happens if we don't do anything?
Well,
we just keep going along the way it's going, status quo.
Well, I think some of the examples I just ticked off, you kind of look at them and say, that's how bad things can get.
But what does that mean for me? I can see, cities are filing for bankruptcy, but if you're the average person who's in the system, what could happen?
Well, if you're in the system, right, and let's just talk about Detroit for a second, they're actually talking about cutting existing retirees' benefits.
Oh, there you go.
Right,
Okay.
these are people who have a pension, they're living on a fixed income, and that's the end game in a situation like that. Illinois, the state of Illinois, is sort of the poster child for where not to go with your statewide pension problem. I think the SEC, right, the Securities and Exchange Commission, cited them for civil fraud because they were essentially lying to their investors about their solvency. So it can get very bad, Maura.
Wow.
How bad is the situation in Pennsylvania now, Representative? When we take a look at our system, where are we in terms of solvency? Which direction are we going? Can you give us some examples of what's the situation right here in the Commonwealth?
Sure. So we are not as bad as some other states, Illinois in particular. So I want that to be clear. But we are for our two pension funds. We've got state employee pension fund, and then we've got the school district pension fund. So those are creatures of state government and state law, and we administer them here in Harrisburg. Both of those funds are cash flow negative, which means between all the money that the taxpayer is putting in, all the money that the workers are putting in, because they put in every year a substantial amount of money, and whatever we can earn on the stock market, we are still paying out more than we are taking in. And I think right now we're about $49 billion underfunded in terms of the promises we've made and what we actually have in the bank account. Billion, 49 billion. And that's about 60% funded. They're currently projecting we're headed down into the mid-50s. Illinois, I think, has crossed the 50% mark. They're about 42% funded, so we don't want to go there.
So you have a solution. You've introduced some legislation, so tell us a little bit about what you think can solve this issue for us.
So the legislation that I have, which actually came out of state government committee in the House in June, and got very close to a vote on the House floor, although not yet. But I'm hopeful that for the next couple of weeks. It creates a defined contribution plan. That's a 401k plan, essentially. It's a 401a plan because it's a government, not a private employer.
And can you tell us the difference, before we go on with the legislation itself, the difference between what you're calling a defined contribution plan and what currently exists, which I believe is defined benefit? Is that
Right.
how that works now in the current system?
So a defined benefit plan is essentially an old line pension. Your number of years of service times a particular multiplier, basically just a number, and then some calculation of your salary. And it's a guarantee, it's a promise, whether the fund is full or not full. So that's what an old line pension is.
And that's what's caused our current issues.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Now, it's not that defined benefits are bad in and of themselves, okay? But the private sector has over the years shifted en masse to these 401k plans, because if you can create a good benefit for your employees and not have these catastrophic changes, why not do that? So that's why the private sector did it. The problem we have in Pennsylvania, and other states have done this, is, at the point when things are going good, it's a promise you make, but you don't really have to worry about it at that moment. The problem we have is in 2001, the state gave very good benefit enhancements and then made them retroactive. Even if you were about to retire the next day, you got essentially a 25% lifetime retired bump in your benefit. Then for the last 10 years or so, we didn't put nearly enough money in as we were supposed to. And on top of that, we assume a rate of return in the marketplace, 7.5%, which we haven't been getting. In fact, I think in 2009 it was a negative 30%.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's a pretty significant difference.
Right. And so a defined contribution plan or a 401k plan is exactly what people know. You put in a certain amount each year as the employer. My plan actually has 4% as the employer contribution. I think that's a good competitive benefit, and I think people will do fine with that. And then they would have to contribute at a minimum 4% of their salary each year. So that's fundamentally what it is. But the taxpayer 30 years from now, with mistakes made at the state level, doesn't get a bill saying, we're short $49 billion, pony up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Representative, how does your bill differ from the governor's solution? The governor some months ago came out with a variety of ideas to solve this problem. It sounds like your solutions are very close. Is that the case?
Well, the defined contribution plan for new people, that's the fundamental core of my legislation. Mm-hmm. I guess it's not humble to say this, but that was a component of his plan that was introduced in the spring. But I was the one who designed it last session. So they literally saw that from last session 2 years ago, liked it, and put it into theirs. But the other things that you can do, the whole idea behind a defined contribution plan for new people is, okay, we've got this $49 billion liability. Let's wall it off. Let's recognize that this is a problem. It's a problem for every school district because they're having to shovel money into it. There are layoffs that are happening at school districts. There are program cuts. There are property tax increases. And the same sorts of things are going on at the state level. This crisis is literally affecting every line item in our state budget, and therefore it's affecting programs that Pennsylvanians are paying for and saying, why is this or that not happening? So the idea is, all right, let's stop adding people to that system because it's a mess and we haven't been able to manage it properly over the years, and create a system for new people which is a good benefit but doesn't keep adding them to the old failing system. So that's number one. Number two is, okay, how do you handle the unfunded liability, the promises already made? The governor's plan did have in it mandatory changes for existing employees. There have been some court cases over the years in Pennsylvania by our Supreme Court which have at least declared that promises made to current employees cannot be changed to the detriment of the employee. Mm-hmm. So that has been an issue with the governor's plan. That I would say is fundamentally the difference.
So What do you see happening with your legislation over the next several months?
I
know there's what you hope will happen, but what do you think will happen?
right.
Because we know sometimes those are two different things.
I think that in the next couple of weeks or month, there is going to be legislative action on pension reform. And here's why. We are literally each year at the state level adding an additional $500 million to the state budget to keep these funds going, keep them solvent. And the same thing is happening at the school district level. So the school districts have been talking to their state representatives and saying, this is killing us. So we need to do something in the near term to solve that, all right? And my view is if you are going to solve that problem, because that's fundamentally about the unfunded liability, while we're doing it, let's declare to the taxpayers of Pennsylvania we are not going to add another person to this broken system. So I think something's going to happen.
Okay.
Who are you working with most closely in the House and the Senate on this idea?
Senator Brown has had a defined contribution plan model for a number of years. He's been in the Senate for several years longer than I've been in the House, and I think he was a state House member before that. So this is an important issue to him. I think I have something like 35 co-sponsors on the bill. We had a number of people voted out in committee who are committed to it. Mike Turzai, the leader of the House, has said that he's very interested in a defined contribution plan. So I think there are a lot of people who are in support of this. But, you need 102 in the House and 26 in the Senate to make it happen.
Well, it always seems that there are the occasional issue that's a no-brainer that has to be dealt with. And what are the biggest obstacles right now? It just seems to me something has to be done.
In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds, why isn't it happening?
Honestly, a defined contribution plan for new hires in state government is... I think it's hard for the labor leaders to accept.
Okay.
And I think they are highly resistant to it. It doesn't affect new or current employees, so I think that they should get with it. The fact is that I think most Pennsylvanians support this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Representative, for coming and sharing your information and the developments on the pension solvency issue. And we'll be watching to see you next week right back here with Mara and I on Behind the Headlines.